hard to be here for the people who need help, and your generous support makes that possible, and I thank you for that. And also on behalf of Reimagine, I want to acknowledge the sadness and the rage that so many of us have been feeling in the aftermath of the race-based killings of recent weeks. We hope and pray that the response to these deaths is not simply a fleeting moment, but the beginning of a transformational shift in the long history of racism in this country. We are optimistic that the voices of racial justice activists are finally being heard and their work amplified as the violent and oppressive impact of racism becomes the work of all of us. This work is urgent, and at Reimagine, we are particularly committed to using our platform to provide space for diverse voices to shine a light on equity. Who gets to live well or die well, and who doesn't? So through our programming, we're going to continue to seed and spark these conversations to ensure that everybody, especially those affected by racism and inequity, has the opportunity to live fully and die with dignity. I encourage any of you out there to join us, come to our programs, host an event, gather your community, and let's talk honestly about how people of color actually live and die in this country, and together move toward more justice and more love. So that's my intro, and now we're going to move on to Life on the Page with Nancy Patz, a program dedicated to living fully, which is an opportunity that indeed should belong to all of us. So Nancy and I are going to be talking about her memoir, Life on the Page, for about an hour. We're going to be talking about both how her stories and the art are really a model for each of us to think about, as Shirley said, the values that we live by and how we might help our families to know us and those values more deeply. And we're going to break out into some small groups briefly designed to help you think about your own precious stories and values, and then we'll come back together briefly. So I'm going to try to put my screen share back on and see if we can get started. Let's see, here we go. So Life on the Page with Nancy Patz. Hi, Mom.
Hi, sweetheart. How are you? Hi, darling.
I'm good. And hello again to everybody. So this event is entitled Reimagining the Ethical Will, which many of you know, but some of you might not know that an ethical will is a document that people often write to share their values and their wishes with children and grandchildren. It's a will, so to speak, of our non-material treasures. So Mom, you have not written a letter or a document. In fact, you have written a memoir, a graphic, beautiful memoir, drawn from dozens of sketchbooks, 92 sketchbooks to be exact, and other art that you've created over the years. And in fact, you have shared that you explicitly did not set out to write an ethical will. But in fact, what you've done here is to convey so much of what matters to you and the values and really your whole approach to life that is so rich and so wise that I was really touched by how this really is a version of an ethical will. And I'm excited to explore with you how you got there and what you set out to do and how the book unfolded. So maybe let's start by just telling us what you had in mind for this book. What did you want to do? What did you not want to do? How did it all unfold?
Okay, first of all, welcome everybody. I'm so happy that everybody's here. It's wonderful, even in this strange new configuration, to know that you are all here while Jeannie and I talk about this book. I did not start out to write an ethical will. I started out to write a book about sketchbooks. I had all these sketchbooks lined up, piled up on the dining room table and other tables as well. But I found out very quickly that other people have written good books about sketchbooks. It's been done, didn't have to be done before anymore. And then I began, I had all the books out, and I began to think about how maybe I could possibly organize them. After all, they covered many, many years. Maybe I could possibly organize them to tell my life story. And then I got to thinking that I knew I did not want it to be preachy, but I did want maybe my grandchildren and my children, you among them, Faith, to know me from my own perspective, from what I wrote, and from what I drew. And I thought that was how I wanted to begin.
So should we take a quick look at those grandchildren that you dedicated this book to?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because they're gorgeous. Aren't they gorgeous?
Yes, and here they are.
And here they are. And my daughters and my stepdaughters are tucked in here too, and a son-in-law or two, and so forth. There they are.
So, hello, all of us.
Mhm.
So this was your inspiration, but let's tell us now. Let's just start by taking a look at a page that tells us what you love about sketchbooks and what draws you to this medium.
Well, I love the immediacy of sketching, of catching the moments. You can catch the moment if you're lucky. And again, and not only that, again and again and again, you get to draw. And I like to draw. So I can have whatever paper I want. I make my own sketchbook, so I put in a variety of paper, a paper for watercolor, a paper, some papers for pen and ink, maybe pencil. And you can have whatever medium you want to draw. I carry it all. And the possibilities are there for catching the moment. And I like this drawing a lot, this page a lot, because there's a page from, there's a sketch from Paris, and on the right, there's a sketch from Tokyo. And what I wrote there seems to say it. Sometimes there's just a moment before the fog lifts or the city wakes up. And if you're lucky, you're lucky. I love the process of trying to catch those moments. Sometimes you catch them, sometimes you don't. But I love the trying. And this is important for me to say right in the beginning. I put this book together. You see Paris and Tokyo. I put this book together with the major help of Gail Goldner Green, my dear friend. Gail is a lawyer and a photographer and a Photoshop expert. So I could pick a drawing from this page in this sketchbook and put it together with another one from another sketchbook. We designed each page and Gail Photoshopped it. I could not have done this book without her. That's the truth. That's the truth.
What a team. Thank you, Gail. Thank you. I know you're here, so thank you for all this work. I want to say that I think I'm having a little bit of audio difficulty, so I'm going to try to switch my audio. But in the meantime, Mom, I wonder if you could tell us how the book is organized.
There are 3 parts. The first part is called Life on the Page, and that's the memoir part. Each of the 3 parts starts with a big painting of flowers. And this is the first part, Life on the Page. In the beginning, I wasn't going to put the memoir first, but it got to be the heart of it to me, and it had to come first. The second part is called the sketchbooks. The second part is called the sketchbooks. And it's coming up anytime now. There it is. And what struck me here, there you see the spiral of a sketchbook, and that drawing really does seem to go, to me, in my mind at least, with what Leonardo said, and I quoted it here. He wrote this in 1490. He said, "Let the sketching of compositions be quick, and let the limbs of figures be not too finished." I could not believe that the way I tried to draw is what Leonardo was talking about in 1490. This is what I try to do. Let the sketching of compositions be quick and keep things not too finished. And the third part of the book is about techniques, what tools I like to use. We're going to see that in a minute. There it is. It's tools and techniques, and what I like to paint with and draw with, and why. But I called it, sometimes I draw with a pigeon feather.
You draw with a pigeon feather?
I do. I actually draw with a pigeon feather. I picked up a real pigeon feather from the street in Perugia, and I loved drawing with it for years. I drew with it for years until it broke. And you can see in the next drawing that it gives such energy, such energy. I drew this with a pigeon feather in a little wash. So it worked for a long time.
I just have to ask, do you only draw with pigeon feathers?
No, I do not only draw. I do not only draw with pigeon feathers, but the pigeon feather is special. I've also drawn with a favorite little twig that I picked up in Midland, Texas, and I drew with it until I lost it. And I've had other twigs, but they're not the same. But I have, of course, bought pens and brushes in art stores. And in the last section here, I talk about which ones I like and why. But the best thing about using any brush or pen is the moment when the gods smile upon you and you know when to stop. That's what I think maybe happened in this drawing, that somehow I knew when to stop.
Knowing when to stop is a very important thing, I think, in most things. And I know that most of you can't see me when I'm talking because my phone is the thing that you're seeing, but I'm just doing that to make sure that I have steady service. So I apologize for not being able to see my face steadily. So let's shift gears, Mom, a little bit. You shared at the beginning that you didn't set out to write an ethical will, that this book evolved from writing about sketchbooks to writing about your own life for your grandchildren. And I want to just ask you, once you made that decision, how did it go? What was that process like?
Well, I did not start in a very organized fashion. I started writing in many notebooks about incidents that I remembered, big ones and little ones. I just kept going in many notebooks, no chronological order. And some of those notebooks, to tell you the truth, have not appeared. I bet there's something good in some of those. So I just wrote, and then later I put them together.
So you didn't have particular stories in mind that you wanted to tell?
I did not. I did not.
I think that's so interesting because many of us who might contemplate writing something or sharing with our kids think we have to have a very special, particular piece of wisdom that and I think maybe we get intimidated because we're not sure what that might be. But it sounds like you didn't start out knowing what you were going to say.
I certainly did not know what I was going to say. Even when I thought I was clear about what I was writing about, I saw nuances that I hadn't known before. I discovered things along the way that I had not known.
Oh, tell us about that. Tell us some of the things that you discovered.
Well, for one thing, look at this picture of my father and me. There. I came to know more clearly than I ever had before how absolutely all-encompassing my father's love and encouragement and support were. And here is one tiny, literally tiny example. That whole little written page you see on the right side, that's a little memo page, about a 2-inch by 4-inch, a little memo pad that he carried in his pocket. And that little piece of newsprint that he cut out and pasted on there is an ad for the publication of books. He cut that out. He cut that out, pasted it on the memo pad and wrote, "Nancy, darling, hold on to this for a bit. You'll have use for it before long. Love, Daddy." And guess what? He sent that to me 4 years before the publication of my first book. 4 years before Pumpernickel. He was thinking ahead for me. I found this page in old papers in the back of a closet just when I was just about finished the book, and I just cried. I just cried. Here's another perfect example of the way he cared for me. I gave him, when Moses Supposes His Toes Are Roses came out, I gave him his copy, and I had inscribed it with hearts and flowers, which was very appropriate for a Pennsylvania Dutch inspired book. And my father looked at my inscription and he said, "This isn't much fun." He said, "Why don't you draw instead that little guy inside the book who stands on his head? He has a very flat head. He's fun." I said, "Well, Daddy, people are going to be standing in line. It takes time to do drawing like that. You know, people are going to be waiting." And my father said, "Well, learn to do them fast." Learn to do them fast. So you see at the top of this page, in looking through all my sketchbooks, I found a little practice page where I practiced doing Dizzy McPete with a flat head fast. And on the left, you see, that's how I've signed the book ever since. That's what I do.
Well, I love these stories, and it's clear how much faith he had in you, even before you were there, even before you were publishing.
Way before.
And I guess I want to know, as you were discovering this, as you went through your art and your memories and your photos, what was it like to really take in your father's deep admiration and support for you in this very specific way, Mommy?
All I can say is I was blown away. I was just blown away.
Well, thank you for sharing this with us. I noticed that in the sketchbook, in addition to your father, you also put in some grandmothers, 3 grandmothers, in fact, 2 of yours and 1 of Daddy's. And I want to know why you wanted to include them.
Well, they're part of my legacy. They're part of your legacy and Susan's legacy and the grandchildren's legacy. And in writing about them, just what I was saying before, I discovered things about them that I hadn't known before. They are each so remarkable and really quite different. One of them came from wealth, had wealth. One became a young widow and lived above the store where she sold dry goods to support her 5 children. And one was really pretty much a lady of leisure until her husband lost his nice menswear store in the mid-20s. And she took it over and managed it. And then in the end of her life, she, as she said, with her bum leg and her satchel, she went on buses around various cities and sold uniforms to waitresses in cafeterias and restaurants. I had done a whole collage about these women earlier, you know, a few years ago. And there it was, sitting there, life on the page. So I put it in the book. I put it in the book. You want to read this poem, dear? Oh my.
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay, great. 3 women of valor indeed, women of strength and character, who figured out what to do and did it. I wish so much that I could talk to them now. I'd hug each one of them tenderly and tell her how proud I am to have known her and loved her and been loved by her. I'd tell her I cherish her memory. It's so beautiful, Mommy, what you've written to them. And I see on this page that your mother, who's another remarkable woman in your life, who we're going to talk more about a bit later. Before we get there, I want to just note that she led you to a particularly long and wonderful chapter of your life, which to what was then an all-women's school, Goucher College. And I wanted to know why it was important for you to include Goucher in your memoir.
Well, the Goucher story spans my whole life. My mother went to Goucher, And so with my friend Ellen Gundersheimer, I played Goucher Girls as a child. And my mother died in my junior year of high school. And my father was in terrible shape. He was very, very bereft and in terrible shape. And Goucher is a good school. My mother went to Goucher. I thought I could go to Goucher and then I'd be home with him. In my sophomore year there, I had a very ignoble thing happen. I flunked the library exam of the big sophomore general exam. It was my birthday, the day of my birthday. I had gotten engaged 4 days before. I was happy, I was distracted. It was spring outside the window. I did not see where it said, turn over and continue, turn the page and continue. So I flunked it. But what's a nice irony is that years later, after I'd had numerous books published, I was invited back to Goucher to speak, and I donated books to the Goucher Library. I love that. I love that. And not only that, all my papers and the dummies and all the workings of all the books are in the Goucher archives. And I've gone back to teach there on the making of a picture book. And the Friends of the Library, as you can see from these invitations here, the Friends of the Library have been marvelously generous and had wonderful book signings and teas and art exhibits and so forth. And the truth is, I thought of this as I was writing, I don't think anybody cares that I flunked the library exam. That please.
I'm sure that that's better.
It's a nice touch, don't you think?
Right. I'm sure things have really changed over these years, and that nobody is holding you for that library exam. And I see why you wanted to include this chapter, because it's such an important evolving story that shows a beautiful arc of your life and reminds us that there are lots of things we can't plan for. And what a lesson that really is for all of us, especially in these moments of so much uncertainty, that life will unfold, that there can be beautiful relationships and stories and connections that circle back and nourish us throughout our lives that we can't possibly know today, but that we can be open to along the way, which you clearly have been. These examples of that you're sharing about what you've discovered through the writing of this book really speak to the power, I think, of telling one's own story, in reconstructing our own narratives as we do when we're writing an ethical will or thinking about what we want to share with our loved ones. We can find meaning for ourselves, Mommy, as you did, that we don't even know was there. So sometimes I think we know the facts of our lives, but in reviewing them again with intention, with attention, we shed new light, and in doing so, we often find deeper meaning. And thinking about our lives, I think we can understand more, and writing about it helps those stories come to life. Joan Didion said it so well, and you actually quote her in the book. She says, "I don't know what I think until I write it down." Right. And the next page, I think, is so very powerful in this respect. It is called Etruscan Farewell. It's a gigantic print. I think it's maybe 8 feet long. It hangs in your living room. Tell us what this is about.
Well, I saw this scene on a sarcophagus in some museum far away. It's the way Etruscans say goodbye. They made dying such a celebration of life. I loved it. And I wrote here, with harps, double flutes, clashing cymbals, and lovers dancing eye to eye in their finest jewels. I loved that celebration of life. And you know what? Making this book has turned out to be another celebration of life, a present I've given myself. My writing it down has indeed helped me know what I think, and most importantly, how grateful I am and glad to be having this life on the page.
Well, I think that this next drawing kind of really says it all, doesn't it?
That's
The
not
growing from,
honey, that's not the right drawing.
no, that's not the right drawing. Here's the drawing.
There's the
It really says it all to me. It's growing from the bud through this beautiful blooming flower and on all of the stages. And in fact, you write in this book, I've never wanted to think or talk about my old age or death. When my friends have used phrases like, at our age, I've cringed. But lately, I've grown more accepting of the inevitability of end of life. Perhaps that's why I decided to make this book, why it came to be important to me that Maya, Sophie, and Livia, Maddie, Daniel, and Benjamin, those are the grandchildren, everybody, know more of my life. And Susan and Jeannie too, and Patrick. And what you've shared here in this last piece is so powerful because of course we know that there are many things we want to teach our children, but most of us don't really want to teach our children about death. We push it far away, as your family did, and we'll talk about that more later. But in creating this book, you've actually gone a different way. And by including this, you've really given a powerful message to your children and grandchildren about what it means to embrace all of life, including our mortality and the anguish of losing those we love. So on that note, I want to ask whether we should move on.
Yes, we should move on.
Okay.
Move on.
So hold on one second. Seems to be there's a certain slide out of order, but we're just going to forget that. So this is something interesting that you've shared, Mommy, in the book. You included a topic that we don't often see in memoirs, which is your teachers. You've had many, many teachers, and you speak of them in the memoir so fondly, with admiration and humility, noting how much you've learned from them along the way, both the ones you've studied with and those you've admired from afar. So tell us about your teachers, who's in the book, and why. Why did you want to include these folks?
Well, because they've been very important in my life, very important. Here's a page from a life drawing class where the model change poses every 2 minutes. So you do a new drawing every 2 minutes. In the upper left there is Betsy Heisler, artist Betsy Heisler, my teacher, posing before the model came. And I have a wonderful chance to tell you that Betsy was the best drawing teacher I have ever had in my life. She made me aware of line and movement, and she helped me see differently. That's all. You know, this page had to be in here.
So in addition to Betsy and Hilda and many other wonderful living teachers you've had, you've also told me that the old masters have also been your teachers, like these, for instance.
Absolutely. Rubens and Daumier and Tiepolo and all those guys all copied art from artists that they admired. So I do the same. I figure, why not learn from the best, right? These two heads on the right are heads I copied. This old woman I copied from Rubens, and I did it with one pen, a reed pen, and another different pen. And here is Tiepolo, and in Giovanni Battista Tiepolo. And in 1991, I spent about a month in the reading room of the British Museum copying Tiepolo because I wanted to learn to draw like Tiepolo, because I had written a book, a children's book, that took place in the hill towns of Italy. And I wanted to draw it light. I wanted to have all that light and airiness of Tiepolo. And I did pretty well, in fact, because a Tiepolo scholar saw some of these, and he really praised me. So I think I was feeling very cocky. And you can do anything, you can ask for anything you want in the reading room of the British Museum. So I asked for Rembrandt. I asked for pen and inks by Rembrandt, and they bring them to you. And they just bring them to you. You're not supposed to hold them. I was holding them like this, but you're not
God,
supposed,
that's so amazing.
I was
That's so
castigated for
amazing.
that.
And I mean, you've always had a particular love for Rembrandt. And I think in front of these, you know, dear intimate friends here, maybe you should come clean, Mommy, about your relationship with Rembrandt over the years.
I think that's just right. I have copied Rembrandt in every museum I've found him. But here in the British Museum, I had these Rembrandt pen and ink drawings brought to me, and I couldn't do a thing. I just didn't get it. I just could not do it. My copying did not go well. I just couldn't do it. So for days, days. So in frustration, I packed up my things. The only time I ever did that in my 5 weeks there. And I was walking the London streets feeling extremely inept. And all of a sudden I had an epiphany. And I realized that I'm not Rembrandt. I'm not Rembrandt. So, I can't draw like Rembrandt. And then I felt much better. On the other side of the page, these drawings came from Amsterdam in the Rijksmuseum, where my dear friend Susan L. Roth, who writes and illustrates books and has done over 50 books, if I may say, I'm not totally au courant, but over 50 books. Susan and I were in the Rijksmuseum with our white gloves on, and we were handing each other back and forth Rembrandt pen and ink drawings. I have to tell you, it was one of those really rare moments.
Beautiful.
It was joyous, yeah.
And then years later, you painted this.
Right. I painted, it's a big painting, oil pastel. It hangs on the fireplace. And I feel as if this is my homage to Rembrandt. I feel.
Well, I'm sure he would be very honored. It's beautiful.
I doubt it.
I have to say, I love this section about your teachers, about you, because it tells me so much about you, about your persistence, how you kind of wrestled through that moment of doubt, I'm not Rembrandt, and still just kept going and went to the Rijksmuseum after, and about your commitment really to following your heart and your passion, and also your humility, how enriching it can be when we actually accept that we don't have to know everything. And I guess it really speaks to joy, Mommy, and how much joy you have in your life and how much you exude that through your art. And this book really celebrates that. So I want to look at a picture first to sort of talk about joy and joy in your life and joy through your work. A picture that really speaks to a lot of joy in my mind when I look at it. This is a beautiful picture of you when you're about 12 with your parents on your back porch, and you're all home and everybody looks so happy. Your father looks so proud. Your mother looks beautiful, and it looks like a very happy time. And it just makes me think about how easily you embrace joy in your life and on the page. And your sketchbooks are an example of that. So I want to spend a few minutes looking at the sketchbooks and talking about kind of how you think about it and what you have in mind when you open a sketchbook. And just as a heads up, Mom, we just have one of these airport pictures here. So we're going to just talk about one.
That's just lovely. My sketchbooks always start with it in the airport. And what I want to do is just catch the moment. I look around, I decide who looks interesting to me and what I want to, what kind of pen or pencil I want to use and who I want to draw. And people are really just models. They're just sitting there, right? So they're just waiting and waiting and waiting. But I like people in motion too. I like people in motion. Here are the whirling dervishes in Turkey. And down in the corner, dancers in Morocco on one of those trips with Hilda Thorpe that I took a bunch of. And I like drawing people at their work, because people are interested in it. They don't care about me drawing them. They just continue doing their work, like the potters in Estonia and the master calligrapher in Japan. And I like to draw kids, which is a very good thing because I draw a lot of them. This has kids from all over. Gail and I took them from lots and lots of sketchbooks and put them here. And I like to draw food. I like meals, and I draw a lot of meals. Sometimes I draw the fish before I eat it, like over there. And sometimes I draw the bones after I eat it. And all of us who went on those travel trips with Hilda, those sketching trips with Hilda and Francoise, know that it was all about sketching. Sometimes I draw the coffee in Austria and the mussels and wine in Estonia in the middle of the page, and a proper tea over there in the garden in Canberra. And I love markets. I really love markets. Sometimes I paint them in a fine line with a light wash, and sometimes I get out the real good brush with a nice thick black line and put vivid color with them.
What do you love so much about markets?
I love all the cacophony that just seems to be waiting to be drawn, like this in Jerusalem. Even without color, you know, you get it. You get the cacophony, the activity. You catch the activity. Even without
now, unlike the last page, this is just pen and ink. So how do you decide when you want to use color?
Well, it's too crowded to paint. When you paint, you have to be sort of sedentary. And if it's that kind of a crowd, like Lexington Market here or the Jerusalem Market on the last page, it's too crowded to paint. And sometimes I just walk around drawing, and I may add color later a little bit or more or not. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't.
So Mommy, tell us about this page. It's like there are all these old pots, very different from the hustle and bustle of kids and markets. What's this about?
First of all, they are not old pots. That's so denigrating. They are ancient pots. They are ancient pots. And I love them. So I draw them wherever I find them, from museums all over the place. And on the left here, that's a big drawing that hangs in my dining room. And on the right, that's a big print. Solar plate etching of pots. And what I wrote on this page is true. I draw them, I paint them, I print them in solar plate etchings. Ancient pots saved somehow from time's destruction. I feel in awe when I draw these survivors. That's what I wrote, and that's how I feel about them.
So it's so interesting because, of course, I've seen all these paintings for years, but I never knew until the memoir that this is what draws you to them. And I love that I'm learning things about you from this memoir and what matters to you and what it means to you to witness, for example, the triumph over the weight of time and life. And actually that brings us to the next topic, which is a beautiful series of work that you've done around survival and resistance and resilience and loss. Tell us a little bit about the books you've written and illustrated about the Holocaust.
Well, these books all started with that hat in the middle, that unlabeled maroon wool woman's hat that I saw in a case all by itself in the Jewish Historical Museum in Amsterdam. And that led to the writing and illustration of my book, Who Was the Woman Who Wore the Hat? And then from there, other Holocaust themes books emerged. Like, for instance, with Susan Roth, who wrote fabulous prose poems about 18 people. We called it 18 Stones, who were the part of a family of my friend Haya Verveer from The Hague before the war. And you see the picture over on the left with, right, of this adorable little girl. That's how old Haya was when she was in the concentration camp. You see that picture? I drew it in 18 stones there next to it in color, and then moving across on the cover of Prism, which is a journal, highly distinguished journal for Holocaust, worldwide for Holocaust educators. I drew Haya again there. And then back to the left, that's Haya's father and her 3 brothers. And them I put on the cover of 18 Stones. So
thank you for sharing these books with us. And of course, these are not the only books you've written. You've also created picture books for young children with lots of silly texts that are fun and playful. Tell us a little bit about what it's like to create these books and the kind of joy it gives you.
Well, there is nothing like getting the book. Finally, they usually send you 2 copies, and you hold that book in your hand, and it is a real book, as opposed to lots of isolated drawings and sketches and finished pages and so forth. After years of thinking and writing and illustrating it, it takes me about 3 years to write and illustrate a book. And it's not always smooth sailing, of course, because not every, I have worked for a bunch of years on a book which had, on a couple books, which then were ultimately rejected. Editors can be very ornery, but it helps a lot when you've got good support at home, which brings us to Patrick. There he is.
So for those of you who don't know, Patrick is your husband, my wonderful stepfather. And it's nice to see that sometimes you include not only strangers in airports, but those who are near and dear to you.
Absolutely. I've drawn Patrick in a lot of sketchbooks, often whether he knows that I'm drawing him or not. And sometimes I draw for the sweet, unmitigated joy of it. I found this drawing in an early sketchbook that was, I guess it was supposed to go in one of the early Ben Janelle books, but it never made it in. But I found it near the end of putting the book together, and I just love the joy of it, because it does express how sometimes, just for the pure, unmitigated joy of it, I
love it. I just love how much joy there is. And also just in looking at how much joy you chose to record in this memoir and to make a record of, and to share that joy and delight with your family and your grandchildren. But this is a memoir, and it also, therefore, is a book that faces some of the hard stuff of life, the sorrows and disappointments and loss and death. And I know that it's not easy, but you've put it in the book, and I think we should talk about some of those moments too. So I want to start with this. Here you've drawn 2 very similar drawings, but you drew them years apart, about a moment that you write about in the book that has become a lasting memory.
And maybe a lasting scar on my psyche too. It's really possible. So what happened? I learned early that I could draw by the fact that I was given big art projects in elementary school. At one point, I was given, in 6th grade, I guess, I was given, I was told to paint the stained glass windows for the Christmas assembly, and also do the Christmas decorations for the library walls. And I guess I wasn't doing it fast enough, because the 2 teachers involved decided that they should take me off, they should fire me from my esteemed position as captain of the indoor safety patrol. And it was a big deal. It was a really big deal to be, I could swing my badge, I walked around, checked on. So there I was in the hall with Miss Hoffacker in the hall, and she fired me from being captain, and I was humiliated and I was embarrassed and I felt absolutely horrible. And what I most remember about this incident is the way I went home that afternoon and sobbed on my mother's chest, just sobbed with her arms around me. And I found in the sketchbooks 2 drawings years apart, 2006 and 96. What was that? 1996, right. Two drawings years apart in which I drew, this was in memoirs of my mother that I did. I did 2 sort of casual memoirs of my mother. And I drew this scene. So I guess it was a very tiny incident, but it must have been real important to me.
Well, it sounds like a really painful moment and also an important moment and memory for you with your mother. So let's talk a little bit about your mother.
Okay. My mother died when I was 17. And I did not go to her funeral because I assumed that I'd have to see her in an open casket and open coffin. And I didn't want that. I wanted to remember her the way I knew her. And so I didn't go to the funeral. Of course, no one told me that that wouldn't be the way it was. No, but we didn't discuss any of this. We just didn't discuss a lot of things. Nobody even told me that she had cancer. I found that out from an ad in that was called the seven deadly signs of cancer in the Saturday Evening Post. It took me almost 50 years to begin to reflect on the loss of my mother and what she had meant to me. And then in an intense burst, I made drawings from old photographs and wrote poems. And I drew drawings on the poems and I did poems on the drawings. This big one has me, I guess I was about 4, Strathmore Avenue, there we were. And this collage I made in which I imagined the emptiness that this little girl, who was me, was gonna feel later. I never acknowledged, what I felt when she died. I worked for many years with these memories and wrote many poems and did many drawings. And when I thought I'd finished, I felt complete. I did a whole bunch of big pencil drawings like this one here. And I felt complete. And months later, I started a big oil pastel painting and abstract. And when I turned it upside down to check the composition, all of a sudden there were those 2 red things. They were my mother's jacket that my father had bought for her on our last trip before she died. They were my mother's jacket. So I painted her face in from photographs and I finished the painting. And after I finished it, I thought I really was done. I thought I really was done. But guess what? I wasn't. I wasn't. I wasn't finished at all.
I guess that grief has its own ways of circling back and bringing you to new layers, new kinds of understanding. What happened here?
Well, this was done right after a trip to China, where I had all these Chinese brushes and Chinese ink. And I drew myself. I didn't draw my mother, but I drew myself a self-portrait and the anger that I felt at her dying. Mind you, this is 50 years later, you know? The anger I felt at her dying. I splashed ink on the page just to mess it up. And I stamped it hard with Chinese stamps that I had bought in the little red ink pot that I bought. And I also wrote in red the words that were in the poem, a poem. Nobody said the word cancer, of course. And I scratched red across the mouth. And then again, I thought I was finished. I thought I was finished, but I wasn't. Here I drew myself expressing how much I missed her and how much I wished she could have known my daughters and granddaughters.
How about if I read this poem here, Mommy?
Good idea.
Where you're thinking about your mother and, at the time, your 3 granddaughters. What if she were here now to look at Livia's luscious sunset or Maya's weighty gargoyles? What if she were here with me, clapping on the sidelines, cheering Sophie, kicking the winning goal? You know, I wish so much that I had known your mother.
Me too.
And I just have to say the incredible art and all the work you have done grieving her, even all these years later, is so moving. So I'm going to take a breath because this is a lot. And we're going to move on a little bit. Since we're talking about some of the hard stuff here, this part of your memoir, there's another hard time in your life that you include in your memoir that unfolded over many years that I'd like to ask you to talk about. So I want you to talk, if you would, a little bit about your marriage to Daddy.
Well, we had 10 wonderful years. Love this picture at the wedding. We had 10 wonderful years. And then Morton's severe chronic depression took over our lives bit by bit, year by year. Because we'd been so close in California and Texas, I took on his mantle of secrecy with ease, and the years went by. 15 years went by. Years when I didn't acknowledge how much I enjoyed painting and drawing, or even that my art was important to me. I kept very busy with community work, and I painted down in the cold, damp cellar that I lit with one light bulb. And I painted paintings like this one, which I thought these paintings were bold and strong, but my good friend Claire told me, these are the angriest paintings that I have ever seen.
Well,
Right.
having lived through those years alongside you, I think Claire was right, and I think this is one angry painting.
Right.
I know those were rough years, and just to say, as your daughter, and even as Daddy's daughter, may he rest in peace, it means a lot to me personally that you wanted these years to be in your book as an important part of your life story, certainly just a part. We all know that life includes sorrow, and it's so brave of you to share this story about Daddy's mental illness, about what it was like for you. And while we're on the brave piece, I'm going to ask you to share one more very brave story that many, many people hide in the shadows. Many of my friends have gone through versions of what we're about to talk about, but you decided to include this in your memoir. So this is a page with lots of beautiful babies, but it's a complicated story in some ways. So I wonder if you would tell us that story.
Well, that adorable baby at the top is your big sister, Susan, who arrived weighing 10 pounds exactly. And I got pregnant right away, and everything was easy. And she brought us previously unimagined happiness, and still does to me. And there you are with me and with Susan. But there are a lot of years between that top picture and the bottom pictures. It seemed, forgive somebody's ringing on the thing, on the fax thing, I can't do anything about it. It seemed easy to create a beautiful baby, but it was not necessarily so. Even the great fertility doctors at Hopkins could not make it happen. there were many years of trying and loss, including a so-called missed abortion, where the baby died at 5 months, but I had to carry it through to term, because that's how they did things in the 50s. And at delivery, nobody would tell me whether it was a boy or a girl. Afterwards, friends and family, everybody was so happy it was over. Finally, I had done this, and the baby was you know, the missed abortion was over, and that was that. It was over, and I went on with my life, not grieving at all, not grieving, and not acknowledging my sadness. In time, I went to a new obstetrician who made a few simple suggestions, and I got pregnant again. And that was you, baby. That was you. And you're right there at the bottom, first with me and then with Susan. And my father, in tears, called my obstetrician and thanked him, quote, for giving us Jeannie.
Oh,
oh I know. Well, so then go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, so then years later, actually, Susan and I were pregnant at the same time, and that wasn't easy for you. What happened then?
Well, my missed abortion years before had left scars that I didn't recognize until then. I was so anxious and so weepy, so terribly, terribly agitated about your and Susan's pregnancies. And I was so afraid I'd make you two anxious and nervous about your pregnancies. So finally, meanwhile, your pregnancies are going on. So I called a psychologist who I had known briefly in Birmingham, Alabama, and I talked to Miriam on the phone, and I wrote, and we talked, and I wrote, and we talked, and I did a lot of work, writing and talking and so forth, and I was able to let go of my earlier grief. Maya and Sophie were born 10 weeks apart, and I thought I had never known such joy. And then 2 years later, the unimaginable happened. And there was Livia. Unbelievable.
And you then decided that you would paint these babies on the wall of your bathroom.
Right, upstairs bathroom above the studio. Right, because I had these 3 gorgeous baby. I painted Sophie and Maya first, and then there was Livia, and the top drawing there is Livia. And don't you think she's saying hello? Hello. I think she
and did. Now those babies, first of all, I want everyone to know that the babies are life size on the bathroom wall. And also those girls are now all in their 20s, and they're all here on this call, Mommy, listening to you. Wonderful. And I think this is the perfect note, first of all, to say l'chaim to these gorgeous lives that have been birthed, and to move on just briefly back to the sketchbooks for a few more minutes before we close this conversation. So I want to bring us back to these beautiful drawings, and just acknowledge that, you know, you have never been a preachy mom. I know I have friends on this call from high school, and I think they would all agree with me. You were not one of those bossy, preachy moms. And in fact, you seemed very surprised when I said that there was wisdom on every page of this book. And so here are some of the lessons that I see in the sketchbooks that I don't think you were even wanting to necessarily put into words this way, but I just wanted to call them out a little bit and highlight them. So the first thing is just a kind of mindfulness. And, you know, your sketchbooks reflect the ability to pay attention. And they did that long before mindfulness became a household word. So tell us about that a little bit.
Well, I guess you have to be mindful to decide what you want to draw. to look around to see what's there. You have to concentrate on that. Then you have to think how you're going to do it, with what tools you're going to do it. If that's mindfulness, you have to be there. Yeah, you're right.
Well, I think also while you're paying attention, you're also teaching us something about how to focus on what matters when life is moving fast, because life does move fast. And sometimes you have to work really fast in your sketchbook.
Right. Sometimes you just have to get it down quickly, like those ladies, the back view of those ladies. Just have to get it down quickly, not worry about the details. You have to grab whatever pen or brush you think is going to do the job best, and just go for it. Go for it. Like on the bullet train, that top drawing there was on the bullet train, or on the little harbor boat in Kyoto. And often a few minutes is all you get, and sometimes a few minutes is all you need. All you need.
I love how when you're talking about working fast and when you're doing it, I imagine that you're not judging, you're not being critical, you're just getting it down.
No, you can't judge. You can't judge. That's what's nice about having a sketchbook, that you can put all, I like to put the drawings all together so that you just keep going, and then you've gotten it on the page.
Now, one of the things we know is that when you have a sketchbook, as you do, especially when you're traveling, it's kind of attached to your hip, and you want to get everything down in it, you have to draw under all kinds of conditions, even in the rain. So what's that like?
Well, you just have to think, well, it's uncertain. I wrote on this page in San Gimignano, sketching in the rain is uncertain, exciting, but uncertain. That's it. You just have to think about what the spirit is of the moment and just get it down. It's uncertain.
So it's just, this is kind of what I meant when I said there's like a little kernel of wisdom on every page, because of course life is like that, right? It's often uncertain. We rarely have as much control as we think we have.
Right, and in here, the words I wrote were, in the rain, I have to work quickly, not quite in control. In the rain, I am not quite in control. That's the truth.
So here's another one that you painted in the rain, and you say in the book that as drops splattered on to the page, drops splatter the paint into puddles on the page. So what is that like when you're in the middle of this beautiful thing and all of a sudden puddles start happening?
Well, I curse a lot. I curse a lot. And then I add another color, or maybe some water, and Kleenex, and I mop it up, and I spread the water around, and more paint, and so forth, and do what I have to fix it. And sometimes, this is the thing, sometimes it's a happy accident. Sometimes something happens that you never thought of, and you have to be alert to that, because you can ruin it. You can really ruin it and take it away. So you have to be alert to it and let it stay if it's a happy accident, and not kill it by overworking it. Just let it be. So you have to be alert every minute, you know.
So I hear so much in the way you work and in the way you've lived, really, about being open and willing to embrace what comes, to find a way to be with it, and even to recognize beauty when we're least expecting it. I guess I want to ask, have you ever had an experience where the rain really affected your experience of the sketch?
I did. One stands out in my mind, where painting in the rain was really profound. Here I stood in a downpour in Pakroy, Latvia, and I was painting an old burnt out, deserted synagogue and the cemetery. And I painted it quickly and closed the book, got back in the car. And when I opened the book, I gasped. because the rain had washed away everything but the sadness, and only the sadness remained. And really, I got the moment, didn't I? The sketch caught the moment. If it had been more finished, been more detailed, it wouldn't have been the spirit of what I felt there. So
Yeah.
that was a good one. That was a good
Yeah.
happy accident, really.
So sometimes it pours,
right.
and sometimes what happens?
Well, sometimes the sunshine is so blindingly bright that you want to leave lots of white on the page so that you get that feeling of that brightness. And there are two pictures of Hilda Thorpe, who was teacher, mentor, friend, wonderful Hilda, who we were in Morocco. This was in Asila, and we you know, it was so bright. That's the way that's the way it was that day in Morocco.
So I love that we are coming around to this beautiful sunlight. I feel like we are back in the light, the glorious light of life and living, of celebration, of connection, of healing from losses, and of joy. And I know this is a painting that has particular just joy and beauty for you, Mommy. And I guess I just want to say how powerful your story is, really, your story of beauty and grief, of the so many lessons that we as your children and grandchildren have come to know through knowing you. This memoir, this book is a gift. It's truly a gift. And it's a glorious example of reimagining what an so-called ethical will might look like. You know, most of us, unlike you, don't have a lifetime of artwork to draw upon in the way that you do, but we each have a lifetime to draw upon, a lifetime of stories and choices that's packed full of lessons and values and discoveries. And as we were talking about at the beginning, if we give ourselves the chance to sort of retell ourselves those stories, we may discover things, and we may discover even things that we want our loved ones to know. So thank you for reminding us that we actually already have everything that we need to convey to our loved ones what we want them to know about who we are and how we live. It's been just a joy to work on this with you and to get to know you even better all these years. I'm almost 59. I love you so much. And I think what we're going to do now is shift gears briefly and open the space for us to go into breakout rooms. And I think I'm going to let Shuli handle the technical side of that. But what we're going to do is invite you in these rooms, should you choose to stay, to share a value or a life story about yourself that you'd like your loved ones to know. So Shuli's going to put us into rooms with a magic button. You don't have to do anything except, I think, hit join. But we want to invite you just to share something, just to kind of get you started on what you might like to share with the people in your life. And we'll be here when we come back for some closing remarks from Shuli.
Hey, what's going on? Well,
Oh, shoot.
Hello?
Hello?
It's
Well,
Jim.
hi, everybody. It looks like there's a bunch of us still right here, not in breakout rooms. So I'm just wondering if anybody has any questions for Nancy while we're here, while we wait for other folks to come back, or if anybody has a value or something that you'd like to put in the chat that you'd like to share with your loved ones. I know it's hard to talk with so many people, but if you want to, maybe you could raise your hand and Shuli could help us unmute ourselves.
I think everyone in this room is unmuted, and sorry that the tech didn't work out to get everyone into smaller groups, but you should be able to speak now.
I see lots of comments here. Magnificent art and love and courage and connection. Thank you for sharing. What a tremendous act of tzedakah. You enhance us artistically and make us braver. That's from Annie. And are there other people who have comments or who want to raise their voices or ask a question?
Hi, Jeannie. This is Paul. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Paul.
Hi. Well, just wonderful exchange, getting to know your mom and her ethical, her legacy. And what I just really liked how you really told us that we have everything we need to leave a legacy. And that's just such a great reminder. And I just want to just say it again out loud, because a lot of times I don't think we look at it that way. So thank you for just pointing that out and just giving that some emphasis, because, your mom would be a tough act to follow.
She is.
No,
Tell
that's
me
not
about
true.
it.
Not true, not true.
She is a tough act to follow, but I so appreciate, Paul, you're underscoring that and you're hearing that, because it's so true. We all have these beautiful lives that we've lived, and all of them have lessons and heartache and triumph, and that's the stuff of our life, right? That's what we want to pass on. And so all of it's there. We all have it. So thank you so much for bringing that back to us.
Hello.
Hi, Marcia.
I'm a friend of Barbara's, your aunt, I assume it is, Barbara Roswell. Yeah. And I'm a friend of hers because my daughter is her best friend. So I'm a friend by association. But I say I'm a member of your family. And I am an artist too, and I do draw when I go places. And I've been so inspired by the dedication to art and to history that your mother has brought in all that she says and all that she draws. So if you ever have a meeting and talk about this in the future, I'd love that you would include me to be a part of that. And
wonderful.
Even if there's something that you found that written to help. I have pages and pages of the story that I wrote about my husband and me and my kids and my grandkids. But I don't have drawings. I have pages and books of drawings. I don't know how to relate, but I was very inspired. And I thank you for letting me come in and being a part of the chat. And if you ever think of doing something more than today, I would so enjoy that you include me in it. So
terrific, Marcia, thank you.
Oh, thank you so
Mom,
much.
did you want to respond?
That's lovely, Marcia. That's lovely, Marcia.
I so love you for all you have done, to all you have created on a piece of paper, because that's what we're supposed to leave. This legacy is our pieces of paper.
Well, it's your life that is the legacy, and you
Right.
can put it together. I know you can.
Well, someday maybe we'll even meet. I happen to live in Arizona, so I don't get to. Are
One of
you
these
on the
days,
East
who knows?
Coast now?
One of these days.
Right. Okay. So just keep me on your list,
I know.
Jeannie. And thank you for all of us who have had the opportunity to just see another wonderful life.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. That's so lovely.
Thank you.
Bye.
Julie, are people coming back now?
Yes.
It
Yep.
closed us up.
People are
Right.
people are coming
Oh,
back
hi,
now.
Melanie.
I know it wasn't enough time, but I hope you got a little snippet, and I think I'm noticing it's exactly 7 o'clock, and this is the moment where in New York City we cheer for all of the frontline and essential workers. So it feels actually like a great moment to be coming back together and expressing gratitude. So if you want to clap or cheer or shout out thank you, even if you're not in New York, there are essential workers all over the country and all over the world. So take a moment to express gratitude. Sorry, everyone. Those are the little people I'll be leaving my legacy to someday. I just.
So,
I just
Julie, would you like to talk about what matters?
Go ahead.
So, as I said earlier, What Matters is an important initiative in the Jewish community in New York. What Matters, caring conversations about end of life. BJ is a proud partner of that project, and as I said, there are facilitators at BJ who are there to help guide our members through the process of advanced care planning conversations and how to have that conversations with your loved one. As facilitators will sit with you, with your loved ones, and really help you work through that conversation. It is a gift to give this clarity to your family, and I can tell you as a facilitator, I've sat through dozens of these conversations, and they are the most moving and important conversations many of us will ever have. So, Julie, I don't know what you want to add to that.
Yeah, I just would say if you want to learn more about What Matters, you can be in touch with me, even if you're not a BJ member. You can reply to the email, the registration email that you got, and that will come to me, and we can share information about the program. And if you're interested in having a one-on-one conversation with the BJ facilitator, that's available to BJ members. But there are What Matters groups and facilitators in lots of other institutions, and you can I can direct you to some of those. And we'll also be offering a couple of group facilitations later on this summer. So we'll let you know about those as well. As Jeannie said, this is an important moment to be thinking about these issues, and it really is a beautiful process. I say this having gone through a conversation myself. It's not just a formality and paperwork, but it's really about what we were talking about tonight. What are the values? How do you want to transmit them? And what do you want the end of your life to look like, so that it's a reflection of what you tried to live your life in service to, and with the holding the values. So invite all of you to take part in that. And I really just want to close with a lot of gratitude to Jeannie and to Nancy. Nancy, thank you so much for sharing with us and inspiring us. And really sharing so much, and the painful parts and the difficult parts of your own story, to be vulnerable and open and sharing all of that with you. We are so grateful for that, and for modeling how we can do that in our own lives and with our own families and loved ones. And Jeannie, thank you, of course, for the magnificent inquiry that brought out so much wisdom and beauty in this conversation. So I'm so thrilled that you were all part of this, and so glad to have this conversation with both of you tonight. Thank you, everybody, for participating. You can check out lots more Reimagine programming happening during the virtual festival, and B'nai Jeshurun programming happening through the synagogue. We're based in New York, but everything's online these days, so everyone's welcome to join us for all kinds of programming that we're having now and over the summer as well. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Jeannie. Good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.